Welcome to Reddit News. Like and subscribe or this will eat your cookies. What are some common facts that people believe to be true, even if the existing evidence states the contrary? Camels don't use their humps to store water. They use them to store fat reserves, because storing fat reserves around the body like humans would keep them too warm. So they have it all in one spot. That is very interesting, and I had no idea. Thank you. I don't get how people think a camel hump is a hollow cavity filled with water. If that were true, it would be mushy and slosh around. Nah, mate. When I was in Egypt, the tour guide asked us if we were thirsty. So when we said yes, he took a needle and poked the camel's hump, and some Dasani came pouring out of it. Ha ha! For a moment, I thought you were serious, but when you said Dasani, sarcasm was noticed. I'd give you the I'm deceased award, but I'm out of coins. This made my day, though. It could be in a matrix, like fat is. Not necessarily. I would assume someone who thinks a hump is a canteen might imagine some sort of bone or cartilaginous material is keeping the shape and rigidity. This considering, they obviously don't know much about the anatomy of a camel. They actually do use their humps as a water source. Yes, it stores fat, open parentheses, specifically tristerin, close parentheses, but that fat is metabolized into CO2 and water, allowing them to go longer periods of time without drinking. It's also used a nourishment reserves id food is scarce. The humps will actually start dropping. That is the primary purpose of fat reserves for any animal, humans included. Yeah, I knew that, but many people don't, or they don't correlate it with other animals. Worms come out when it rains because they are drowning in their holes. No, not really. They mostly come out because when it rains heavily, they are able to survive on the surface for much longer and move around, finding new areas to feed and more worms to breed with. An earthworm breathes oxygen by absorbing it through its moist skin. It likes damp soil, but if the rain is very heavy, the oxygen in the waterlogged soil may run out. Then the worm has to come up into the air to breathe. On top of the wet ground, the worm can breathe and wriggle along. Wait. Isn't this equivalent to drowning in their holes? So which is it? It's both. They can't breathe well when it's raining too hard because the oxygen depletes in the soil due to air pockets being filled with water. But also provides a great time for them to be above ground without drying out, to find new areas and other worms to mate with. Cutting your facial hair makes it grow in thicker. I had a full-on argument with an individual who firmly believed that genetics played no possible role in hair growth whatsoever. I have never been more perplexed or angry in my entire life. Sincerely, bald at 25. I am a master esthetician, and I've studied hair growth, and I can confirm, shaving/waxing/plucking does not make more hair grow thicker nor longer. The reason for this misconception is when you shave, it makes the tip of the hair blunt, so when that protrudes from the follicle, it appears to be thicker. The only change in hair texture/thickness/length/etc. occurs in the papillae, open parentheses, hair root, close parentheses, which is completely determined by hormones.
Edit.
Hi, y'all! As much as I love talking about my field, I gotta turn in, but consider contacting a local esthetician for your skin/hair questions. That Einstein was a bad student and was bad at math. It's just not true. He got average, high marks, and was really just disdainful of the structure of school, and he was good at math. Physics is like 90% math. I get why people share it. It's to make struggling students feel better about themselves. But can't we tell them about something else instead of lying? Just show them the salary of a plumber or welder compared to their teacher's salary. That ought to cheer them up.
Edit.
Thanks for the award. And also, I'm silencing notifications as I woke up to 50 replies this morning. Einstein's grades in school were very good, except for languages. That doesn't even mean much as his English was perfectly sufficient to live and teach in America later in his life. The confusion comes from the fact that Einstein was German but went to a Swiss school. In Germany, 1 is the best grade and 6 is the worst. In Switzerland, it's the other way around. As Einstein was graded 6 in maths, that surprised many people expecting to look at a German report card. I watched a really good Einstein documentary/miniseries a few years ago. Something that is an interesting fact about Einstein is that his wife, Mileva Maric, helped him write some of his most profound theorems. She was the only woman at his college majoring in physics. This was very unusual at the time. Mileva was very smart and made huge contributions to physics/science in Einstein's shadow. Sadly, she wasn't recognized for her work. As a young woman who is pursuing a degree in the sciences, she is a huge inspiration to me. She chose not to be, from what I can tell. When people asked why the articles on, for example, capillary action were only published under Einstein's name, she would respond that it was pointless as they were a team. In the terms of their divorce, she actually got the prize money when he won his Nobel. What I can gather from the sources like this article is that she checked/corrected his math. He's quoted saying at a party, "I wish my wife was here. She fixes all of my mathematical problems." A few of his papers do have mathematical mistakes that led to semi-wrong conclusions, open parentheses, such as his early static universe model being hilariously unstable, close parentheses. It's more of a case of a failure to properly analyze the equations than outright math errors, open parentheses, although some of his papers do have notation errors as well, close parentheses. Keep in mind, nobody at the time of publication caught these problems, open parentheses, i.e., all of his peers, close parentheses, and it was only a few years later, after additional analysis and discussion in the community, that these mistakes became obvious. But it's still a bit encouraging to the rest of us that Einstein didn't get every single achievement of his 100% right in the first attempt. He did make mistakes and later corrected them. People also keep saying he slept 3 hours a year for some reason. This also just isn't true. It's the opposite even. He thought sleeping was very important and slept 10 hours almost every day. There are many people as well who make the case that Einstein was not very good at math for a physicist. Einstein's true strength was imagination and thought experiments. Different accounts say different things, but special relativity is pretty simple math, and general relativity is, open parentheses, according to some, close parentheses, copied math from a friend, which Einstein was lucky enough to be aware of when other physicists weren't, which took him much longer to unify with physics than realistically it should have. He also paid a lot of people to do calculations for him, etc., etc. Of course, these narratives are also up for debate, but this is likely as accurate as Einstein was bad as math gets, and he's still insanely good at math. And others still dispute this narrative and say that unifying these equations with physics was really hard and Einstein was extremely good at math, open parentheses, even for a physicist, or maybe especially for a physicist, close parentheses, to do so. There are many people as well who make the case that Einstein was not very good at math for a physicist. Still probably false. I doubt many physicists at the time were up to date on their differential geometry, and it's trivially true that none of them helped develop probability to the level that he did. Open parentheses. His work on Brownian motion came before probability even had rigorous enough axioms to state the problem he was trying to prove. Close parentheses. It is rarely necessary to wait 24 hours before filing a missing person report. Yep, our police has this listed on their Facebook page as a common myth. Someone really needs to let Hollywood know. Vikings never actually drank from skulls of enemies. This was based on a mistranslation of Old Norse poetry in which they referred to drinking from horns. They never had horns on their helmets either. Even as a kid, I thought that would be wildly inconvenient. The enemy could knock the helmet off of you super easily. Also, they did not wear helmets with horns. This idea comes from the way they were represented in a particularly influential opera. There's an opera version of Hagar the Horrible? Die Hagar Maus? A person drowning is not likely to be flailing wildly and yelling like in the movies. Drowning can often happen with mostly silence, especially with kids. Read up on the signs, it might save a life. I was drowning and lost consciousness when I was 5. I was told I barely made a sound. I went under, sucked in lungs full of water when I tried to cry out in a surprise and blacked out. If it wasn't for my dad's instincts and quick action, I'd be dead. Lightning never strikes twice in the same place. In fact, it does, and frequently. You don't want to be there when it happens. If it didn't, lightning rods would be useless. Edit. Redundant isn't as good of a word. You don't replace your lightning rod after each strike? Nah. Just engineered so they move a fraction of an inch after each strike. The electricity provided by the lightning is way more than enough to power the motor that moves them. 1.21 gigawatts. A lot of people think they can burn belly fat by doing crunches or slim their arms down by doing push-ups. But targeted fat loss isn't possible, and there's no evidence to suggest it is. True. One analogy of this I heard involves a pool of water and a bucket. If you take water out of the pool with the bucket, open parentheses, burning calories to burn fat, close parentheses, even if you scoop in one place, it will remove water evenly across the pool. Some people's genetics store fat more in certain parts of the body, and you can't spot reduced body fat. Cracking your knuckles too often will give you arthritis. Nope, no conclusive study has ever backed this up. It just releases the gas from the synovial fluid in your joints, which is neither good nor bad. Oh, that's good to know. As a kid, I just accepted my fate because I liked the crack sound. Ha ha! Knuckles go pop pop. My mum tried to convince me that studies done by professionals prove that it's bad for your joints. When I cracked my knuckles at my uncle's house, open parentheses, he's a doctor, close parentheses, she tried to get him to back her up by saying that it's bad for me. I haven't heard about it since he said, no, if anything, it's better for your joints. Anytime someone says there are studies that show you XYZ, your immediate and only response should be, show me these studies. 3-part. 1. Show me the study, open parentheses, ease, close parentheses. 2. Who funded/supported said studies? And 3. What controls were in place? Who verified it and what supporting evidence/studies/documentation are available to corroborate? People rarely even know the study, much less the important background info about said study. Edit! Formatting. There is in fact a guy who spent 60 years cracking the knuckles on his left hand twice daily, and there was no resulting difference in his hands. Yup, I think there are even pictures. I always heard cracking them would make them bigger. I scrolled fairly far down and did not see what came to mind for me. A lot of people think blood is blue inside of the body, and that it only appears red because of the oxygen or something in the air. I tried to explain this to a past coworker, who was a former nurse, and she wasn't having any of it. Turns out a lot of otherwise smart people believe that with no evidence. But blood is always red, just darker at some points of circulation in the body. And it's very easily disproved too. I'm a phlebotomist. And we draw blood into evacuated, open parentheses, vacuum, close parentheses, tubes. There's very, very little air in them, and the blood is still red. I remember this one. My favorite part is when they say blood turns red when you bleed, because it absorbs oxygen from the air and changes color. That's why bruises are purple. But if you cut a bruise, you bleed red. If blood just sucks up oxygen from contacting the atmosphere, lungs sure do have a lot of unnecessary moving parts. Edit. There's some science getting laid on me here. Thanks. That if you touch a baby animal, like a bird or rabbit, its mother will neglect it and it will die. That is a myth. It was just a way for parents to get their kids to leave baby animals alone. Yeah. A few weeks ago, a baby bird fell out of its nest in our backyard. It survived, and my dad was going to put it out of its misery until I told him that this myth wasn't true. We put it in a cardboard box on the table closest to its tree with some food and water and just left it alone. Its parents found it the next day and were bringing it food, and within a couple of days, it was gone. Chicken is cooked when it is no longer pink and the juices run clear. In fact, it's cooked when it hits 75 Celsius, open parentheses, 165 Fahrenheit, close parentheses. And that's it. What it looks like depends on the cut. Chicken breast often has significant pink in it when it hits the temperature, which is why most people complain about dry, boring chicken, because they overcook it. On the flip side, wings can look cooked when they aren't, which is why they're a major source of food poisoning. The most important thing I learned working in a commercial kitchen. 165 Fahrenheit isn't even required. 165 means it's instantly safe, but a lower temp for longer is also fine. Kenji prescribes aiming for 150 should be good for breast. The most people only use 10% of their brain's capacity thing. Utterly ridiculous. The brain is a giant, metabolically expensive, staggeringly complex structure. Why on earth would our bodies grow something like that and then not use it? Edit! A lot of people in this thread have some very strange ideas about brains. Yes, if all your neurons fired at once, that would be extremely bad. The thing to bear in mind is that different areas and structures of the brain are highly specialized for certain tasks. Talking about an overall brain capacity is misleading. There are no unused areas of the brain. You're almost certainly right. But it just makes me think of my friend that bought a 2,500-pound MacBook and only uses it for Word and web browsing. Don't worry, that just means that it's tiny. Nah. Size has little to do with intellect. Mostly means their brain is smooth as a grape. That being in a cold place causes common cold. Edit. Yes, I know that being in a cold place makes your immune system weaker, and because of that, it's easier to get sick. But that wasn't the thing I was trying to say. I've been trying to convince my mother for 30 years that going to bed with wet hair will not make you wake up with a cold. She will believe it to the grave. I much prefer colder temperatures, and I used to open my bedroom window at night in the winter so that I could sleep better. But my mom hated this and constantly insisted that I would get sick. It wouldn't be open if it was cold, Mum. It actually is proven that a lot of people do sleep better with colder temperatures. So you go. That strawberries are actually berries and watermelons aren't. Wait, what? Watermelons are actually considered berries because they have their seeds inside of them. Strawberries have their seeds outside, so they are not technically berries, even though they have berries in their name. Carrots make you see better. It was made up by the British Army when they got their new guidance system. Carrots can actually blind you if you try to eat them in the dark while really drunk. Trust me. I tried stabbing carrots into my eyes and they didn't help my sight any. So that is definitely fake news. You probably didn't stab them hard enough. Try again. My biggest pet peeve is when people say sweating is an effective way to rid your body of toxins. First of all, what toxins? Second of all, our bodies are made with an effective waste system that gets rid of things we don't need or that are harmful to us. It's called peeing and pooping. Sweating is our body's way of cooling itself down. It's not a waste removal system. It's just a quick way to get dehydrated and lose a lot of sodium, which we need. Excellent point. That sugar makes you hyper, or makes kids hyper. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. People have a perception it does though, essentially a placebo effect. As a parent, I must admit that I struggle with this one a lot. I'm all for objectivity in the scientific process, but I've also been to a lot of kids' parties. My cognitive dissonance is all the way up to 11 on this one. There's another correlation other than sugars here, and that is parties. Parties are typically high-energy environments, but it has nothing to do with sugar, and everything to do with a big group of kids having fun.